Evening everybody, and welcome to the Scam Pro Audio webcast. That's actually the last time I'm going to be able to say that, because this is the last one tonight. From the next time you see us, we're going to have a brand new format, a very exciting new format, and one that we're really looking forward to. We're going to be launching a thing called the Pro Audio Show, and we're hoping to make it a half-hour magazine program going out eventually week after week, featuring all the pro audio news that's fit to print. We'll still have demonstration sections in the middle, and we hope that those of you who've enjoyed our webcasts see it as a real natural progression. So tonight, even though it's kind of sad, it's kind of glad as well, because we have with us the ever lovely Tim Chandler from Nektar. Now, he's going to be talking to you tonight about Nektar keyboards, but also about Bitwig, which was something that we got behind very early, back in the beta days, and we've followed its progress, and I'm happy to see how well it's doing. And also Nektar, run by my old buddy Niels Larsen. So we're really pleased that the last webcast in this format is going to be done by Tim, and for those of you who've tuned in to find out all the latest about Bitwig, I'm sure we're going to be enthralled. See you in a second.
Hi guys, this is Tim Chandler, the product manager for Nektar and the UK specialist for Bitwig Studio. Welcome to the last webinar from Scam Pro Audio. It's quite a privilege to be the last man standing, so to speak. Just about one year ago, Bitwig Studio was launched, and I came here to do a fairly in-depth look at the software. And I won't go into too much depth on the actual kind of nitty-gritty basic features of Bitwig Studio, because you can always watch that webinar, which is available on YouTube. However, what I am going to do is show you some of my personal favourite features in Bitwig Studio version 1.2, which is currently in beta. We're going to have a closer look at some of the new features that 1.2 is introducing, and we're also going to look at the Nektar Panorama's up-and-coming 1.1 version integration in 1.2, and so all of this is very much a preview, and I'm very much looking forward to showing it to you. Now, Bitwig Studio is one of the great things about Bitwig Studio is it's clip based. All of the editing takes place in clips. A clip is like a brick, if you like, that you put in a wall when you're building your song. The song being the wall. Hope that makes sense. So we're going to start by looking at a vocal clip. Let's have a look. I'm going to start with one that everyone can use if you have the Bitwig Studio, or if you have demo. I'm just going to use the demo content here. I'm just going to use this Wave Alchemy vocal loop here. Show you what that sounds like. Okay, so we're going to do something with that and make it nice. So what I'm going to do first of all, with it selected, Apple L, that's going to loop it round. A lot of what I'm going to do, I'm so used to using the panorama, I have to be honest, that I'm so used to the workflow of the panorama, it's sometimes difficult to adjust back to Bitwig, but for the purposes of the demonstration of software, I'm going to try and stay more hands-on the QWERTY controls for the time being, so that you can see exactly what I'm doing with the mouse and with my shortcuts. And then I'll move for the second part of the show, or when it seems appropriate, into the panorama, and we'll discuss the actual integration, how it's all working there. But for now I'm going to start over here. Okay, so the first thing that you'll notice is there's some silence at the start of this clip, which we want to get rid of. So one of the nice things about Bitwig is the zooming. You can zoom either at the top in the panel there, or you can zoom with Control and Alt if you've got a trackpad, and up and down is going to zoom in and out. And the first thing I'm going to do is just make sure that this lines up nicely with the start of the clip. So just by dragging everything back like this, we now have a... Okay, I'm going to speed that up a little bit because it sounds a bit slow and boring, so let's go for it. It's a little bit better. And so very quickly, in fact, in a few seconds, I've already edited a whole audio clip and made sure it all fits nicely within a project that I'm going to build from. When I press L, it opens up the second part of Bitwig Studio. There's two sequences. You have this linear arranger type way of working, and then you have this loop-based way of working. I also find the looper useful as a way of storing variations of a loop I might be working on. I'm still, some may say, old-fashioned, and I prefer working in an arranger type way. However, I do find the looper useful for many ways, and one of the things you find yourself a lot doing is holding down the Alt key and then dragging in the clip so that I can make a variation of this clip. So the first variation I'm going to do is I'm going to edit the gain and the pitch in order to make a kind of like a vinyl stop effect, if you like. So by selecting pitch and adding a few points in here, like so, and then pitching down. Let's just have a listen to that. Okay, so that's quite cool. And then I'm going to add some gain and do the same with some gain just to make it a little bit more realistic. So let's try it there. Try that. Drag that down. You see how the waveform updates to show you how the audio is affected by the edits you're making. And if I hold down Alt in the middle, I can add a curve, because you can see that that's going to be way too. It's going to go way too quickly. So I can just ease it off it with the curve like that. So now we get a. Okay, and another thing I'm going to do, again, Alt and drag to duplicate. It might be useful to trigger that effect instantaneously. So what I can do is with the same clip, I can just start it from a different point. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to change it from being a loop as well, because it doesn't have to, even though this is a loop-based way of working, it doesn't have to loop. If I turn the loop off, I then have the ability to, well, first of all, I'll set the length so that it's just one bar, like so, and it gives me the ability to then tell Bitwig what I want to happen when you get to the end of this clip, because it's not looping. It says, what do you want me to do now? And it could just stop, or it could potentially return to arrangement. Now this is useful in many ways. The way that Bitwig works is the looper section overrides the arranger section. So you can see that with a clip active here, this little emblem over here becomes highlighted, and what that means is that the playback focuses on the looper. So this is irrelevant because this is not time-based, and this is. What I've done with this one is I've turned the loop off, and I've said after it's finished playing. Actually, I did it for the wrong one, so let's try that again. Yeah, so there we go. After it's finished playing, it's going to return to the arrangement, which means when I hit this, so I can just throw that stop in when I feel like it, and then when it finishes through, it can go back. I'm actually going to turn it off to just say stop, because an end sound like that, you just want it to finish, really, don't you? Anyway, okay, so there's one quick example of, well, a very quick example of editing audio. Bitwig is lightning fast for editing audio, and what's really nice is all of the edits are in clip. So, for example, if I now was to drag this clip into the arranger, let's just zoom out a little bit, and you can see if I drag it around, hovering down at the bottom of the clip gives this little loop sign, and now if I play this around on the arranger, so when I click this little button, it gives the playback to the arranger again. You can see that that clip has then been, obviously by dragging it across, it's been copied across to the next part, and it's maintained all of the gain and the pitch modification that I made in it as well. The same applies to any automation that you make. it applies to any edits that you make to audio events and to note events, because on top of audio clips there are note clips as well. I'm not going to do that, of course. So back to normal. Okay, so there we have one thing you can do with audio clips. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a very quick way of adding some interest, if you like, to or building something slightly different from an existing audio. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a MIDI. Well, not really a MIDI track; it's a note event track. Bitwig doesn't store things as MIDI; it stores it as note events. And there's a lot more you can do with note events once it's in there. So what I'm going to do is just slice the audio up onto a drum machine, or in this case a sampler. And what you do is, let's just solo that out so you can hear what's going on. Okay, now before there, I'm going to stick an arpeggiator. Now, did you see what happened there? When you click on the plus, up pops this new browser. Now, this is a new feature for 1.2. It is a lightning fast way of getting anything you want. The nice thing about it is, depending on the point in the device chain that you click, it will filter out certain devices. In this case, because I clicked before a device, it's expecting that I want to do a note effect, and that's exactly what I am doing. When I click on the patch browser for the arpeggiator, immediately I've got my arpeggiator patches up here. Patches can be. We'll talk more about it as I go along, because you'll see this browser more and more and more, and I'll explain how all the filters work as I'm going along, because it'll be used for different purposes, and you'll see in a bit how we're going with that. So now I've got an arpeggiated pattern. Let's just. There we go. So I'm going to turn read trigger off. So now I've got a slightly more interesting version of the audio clip. Arpeggiated vocals. There we go. My first tip to creative production. So what I can do with this, let's just turn it up a little bit because it's losing a little bit of gain. Okay, now something else I might want to do is let's do it again, and this time I'm going to do it on the onset. So an onset is essentially a transient, so it's a point where the volume, the Bitwig sees a significant increase in volume, if you like. So it would be like your drum. If you're doing this to a drum loop, an audio drum loop, then it's going to be your drum beats, if you like. So slicing an onset is quite interesting. And let's just call this, I'm going to call this glitch, because I'm going to do lots of, well, glyph. There we go. I'm going to call this glitch because, this track glitch, because I'm going to do some, I'm going to do some glitching. So I'm going to add an arpeggiator again. So straight away, because it's a node effects, there's my node effects, and I can pick my arpeggiator. Now this time I'm going to use the keys rather than using the MIDI that it already created in order to step through the audio. And so you can see what I've got there is a kind of a glitching version of the audio. And we can use this. Obviously, if you use it with the audio, it just sounds like a mess because there's way too much going on. But what you can do in Bitwig with this is since 1.1, by the way, so this isn't a new thing for 1.2. You guys can do this now. You can use Bitwig has several mods, so and these mod devices are so useful. It's basically a way of getting signal from anywhere you like in Bitwig to another track in order to have an effect. So by opening up a note mod on this vocal track here, what I'm going to do is send the glitching input in, like so that when I'm playing, let's just record on the glitch track, and you should see, you can see down here, it's triggering my envelope. So I'm going to turn my envelope attack down to nothing, and same with the decay, and then turn the sustain up, and that should have the effect of note on, note off performance. Now what that means is when the note is on, it's going to trigger and do something. It's going to affect, it's going to add a modulation, if you like, to another parameter. In order to modulate a parameter in Bitwig, you add to the effects chain of your mod. So what I'm going to do is add a compressor. And these little symbols down here are your mod sources. When I click on one of these, the parameters turn colour to indicate that you can then modulate those parameters. And because I put my compressor in the effects chain, this is important, because if it wasn't in the effects chain, then this device wouldn't be able to see it. I can then modulate my threshold and bring it right down like that. Okay, and if I crank up the ratio, you should find that you're effectively compressing the audio on this audio track by using the glitching effect from down here. So let's just have a listen to that. Okay, so we've still got underneath, that worked nicely for the vocals, but we've still got this track underneath. But what's nice about Bitwig is everything is all editing is the same. So I was using Alt and drag in order to get a duplicate of a clip from the arranger to the launcher. In this case, I'm going to use Alt and drag to take this device that I've just created, and I'm going to put it on the other vocal track that I have, which was my arpeggiated vocal track. And now we should find that by playing the glitch while we are playing, okay, so you can see now it's overriding both vocal tracks. So it's quite a interesting effect, and very, very simple to set up with Bitwig. Very complicated in many other DAWs, but with Bitwig it really becomes easy because of these modulators and the ability to take notes data or audio data, depending on the mod you use, and use that to modulate anything you like. This is what the Bitwig's universal modulation means. It means you can modulate anything with anything. You can modulate other modulators. The possibilities are endless, let's say. Now, seeing as I've got 3 different vocal tracks on the go here, I'm going to introduce another new feature for Bitwig 1.2. So if I select them, all 3 of them like this, what I'm going to do is Apple G, which is a group. So if I was to right click on these tracks, then you can see what comes up and is now the group. It's the ability to group the tracks, and the shortcut is Apple G or Control G if you're on a PC. So I'm going to name the group vocals because that's what it is, and you can see now I can fold away all of those vocal tracks. You'll also notice that I have separate scenes here. Now these scenes can be triggered separately from the global scenes. If I trigger a global scene like so, it will trigger all of the scenes within this group, the relevant scenes. If I trigger the scene of the group itself, then it doesn't affect the global scenes that are playing. So we'll have another look at that later when I've added some extra information. I'm not just going to mess around with vocals all night, don't worry. You'll also see a thumbnail of what's available in the clip. So if I add another clip in here, then you can see that it adds another clip there saying that, okay, so we've got a little bit more going on. And the same goes for here as well. So in a similar way, over in your arranger you have a representation of your your kind of, it's like a thumbnail, if you like, of what's in the group. So when that's hidden away, I can still see the kind of arrangement, if you like, of all of the tracks that are within that group, and it updates in real time. The other thing you can do is you can add devices directly to the group track. So for example, I could add an effect I like to use that I created called itch, mainly because it will essentially just scratch the audio. So let's just go back and hit play. Put everything back on the arranger. So you can add scratches to your audio if you like in real time. It's quite a nice little effect that I built from the step mod, and a few creative uses of the rotator and the flange effects. But what's important about that, of course, is that I'm affecting several tracks at the same time, because I put it on the main group bus, if you like, if you want to use that kind of terminology. But yeah, it's essentially a group track, and you can treat it like any other track, adding effects, so on and so forth. You can move meta. I think these are called meta clips, if I remember correctly. But these can be moved and edited in the same way as a normal clip as well. So you can move things around in your Ranger. So, like I said, we'll come back to this group again, and we'll start triggering things separately. We've got ourselves a one thing. You know what? Before I move on, what I am going to do is I'm going to add a keyboard shortcut to mute whenever I want to those annoying vocals. So here's yet another new feature of Bitwig Studio. This little hand down the bottom. This is 1.2 feature. Is a way of adding mappings for your for MIDI or for QWERTY. So when I click on this, everything turns this kind of light greeny colour, and I can map anything at all. I can map levels by setting the level and assigning it to a QWERTY function. In this case, I'm just going to trigger this scene. So I'm going to click on that. It shows me that it's ready to learn, and I'm going to press any key. That means that it's going to trigger. It's going to trigger that that scene, and that's going to shut the vocals up whenever I want them to. Okay. You can have one key can do multiple things. So, for example, if you had two tracks, you can target the mute of both tracks, so that one of them can switch between the other. This is for me was one of the big omissions from the original version 1 of Bitwig. Because this really makes it incredibly flexible. When you combine it with a control script like the Panorama has, the level of control that you get for both creative production and for live performance is just mind-boggling. On top of having your mappings in here, you also have the ability to see that that's now triggering the scene. You also have those mappings, I should say. These mappings here are session based, whereas if you go to the preferences menu now, you will see in here you now have shortcuts. Now here are the default shortcuts that Bitwig have already provided. These are global, so these affect every project, and you can edit them. You can also add MIDI mappings as well, so it doesn't just have to be QWERTY shortcuts. You can add controller mappings as well. So, like I say, there's lots of ways that you can customize your workflow with Bitwig now. It's just another step to creating the ultimate workflow. Okay, so now I've got a way of when I want to stop that vocal, and I'm just going to alt drag that into there so that when I stop it, it doesn't stop the nice kind of arpeggiated vocal that I've got going on. And I'm going to duplicate that onto here as well, so that I've got... Okay, right, no more messing around with vocals, let's do something else. So I'm going to fold those away, and I'm going to add a drum machine. And perhaps this is a good point to introduce the panorama and the integration. I'm just going to load any preset for now, because one of the things I used to find very frustrating with computer music based production generally is the dry sound of digital audio, and drums in particular. Without doing much to this particular preset, you can hear it's quite dry and not that exciting. And the secret to getting big sounding drums, those kind of professional sounding beats that you get on albums, is parallel processing. Bitwig makes that very, very easy because of the parallel effects chains that you can have. So what I'm going to do is show you one of these tools that I created called the drum effects. And what this does is give a lot more power to the drums by adding parallel processing. It's effectively just an effects chain with this layer which is all parallel, and that's what makes it possible. So we've got compression going on, we've got some distortion, a bit of reverb. This boom is basically filtered reverb, so that I can add a bit of bass drum boom, bit of extra boom to my bass drum and my kicks. My EQ is based on it's basically designed so that you can very quickly choose the kind of get a decent sounding drums, which means that I'm happier with the sound, which means I'm happier to produce with it. So essentially, yeah, lots of parallel processing going on. We've got about 9 different effects going on there, and a pumper control to make the transient stand out, basically. So with that in mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all I'm going to trigger this scene, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some recording. And let's go to, I'll tell you what we've got before we do. Let's just have a look in here. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this in rather than that one that ends. Okay, so now I've got the vocal going that I want. I'm going to restart, and we're just going to record some drums. Actually, you know what? I'm going to turn off the looper because I'm going to do something a little bit more interesting this time around. Just to show you, this is just one example of how you may choose to work with Bitwig, and how you can use the looper and your ranger together in order to get out of that kind of just continuous looping syndrome that you can sometimes have. So I'm going to hit record, hit play. Okay, that's enough. Basically, what I was doing there was just jamming in random beats. And now what I can do with the time selection tool, these are your editing tools with Bitwig. They work in whatever we happen to be whatever view we happen to be working in. They're always the same. And you can select them with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on your QWERTY keystroke. So let's just have a little listen back to that. So I'm going to take, with the time tool, I'm going to select this little area here. Now, whatever's selected, Apple L is going to loop it, so you can hear what you got there. And then Alt Command this time round, because we're selecting a piece of time, I can drag just that one piece of the clip I recorded into here. So I've now got a looper going on. Okay, so we got like a main riff there where there was a faster one somewhere, I think. Let's go a bit further on. It's all the same. That's because I've got it on looper. Let's try that again. Okay, so that's a slightly faster one. I'll have that too. You can just take pieces of what you've done, stick them in there. There was a fill in there somewhere as well. Let's have a little look. There we go. Let's just grab that. 1 bar fill will do. Stick that in there. I'm going to call this a fill because what's nice is you can name your clips. And as we'll see on the panorama, we just go to our launcher, transport mode, launcher. If I press the clips, then I can trigger my clips for the selected track, being the drums here. You'll also see that the clips are named as well. So okay, but with this being a fill, I'm going to go back to my to a similar thing to what I did down here with this vocal clip. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the looper, and I'm going to say I want it to return this time to the last clip that was playing. So if this clip is playing, start the panorama. I'll do a fill. Okay, so it looks like that fill needs to be 2 bars. So what I can do is I can just increase that like so, add the clip, and then the time till I can duplicate it. That was easy. Okay, that's better. Right, so mute the vocals. That's better. So you see how the scenes are working slightly differently now. If I trigger this scene, everything comes in together. If I trigger this scene, I'm still playing in scene one on my global scene, if you like. So it's quite an interesting way of using groups, if you like. You know, having different scenes that you can trigger. So, okay, let's add something else. Let's go for some bass. In this case, I'm going to add a new track, Apple T, and I'm going to add a bass container, which is a tool that I use in order to get, well, basically to get some sub bass. It doesn't do much by itself, but what it does do is gives you like a layer of sub bass, which you can then add to. So if I this is another good way of demonstrating the speed at which you can work and some of the uses of the browser. I'm just going to type in bass, and you can see then I've got presets for all of my VSTs, all of my I can dive into different types of bass, with, you know, based on the meta tags for the patches that are done. It's all of the devices, all of VST. I don't care what device it is in this case. I just want to audition the basses, and I can do that from Panorama because the fact that even without being controlling the browser yet, we haven't got the actual browser control going just yet because it's 1.2, and I haven't had very long with 1.2, but we will. And for the time being, you can use the QWERTY keystroke function of Panorama to go up and down and audition. When I audition your different basses. So I'm happy with that one, so I'm going to go with that. Okay, so what's going on here with this sub bass? One of the interesting things, of course, is competing drum kits and basses is always a problem. One neat trick to look around that is to potentially add a filter onto your master, and then let's bring that down to about 60 to 50 hertz, and then what this does is essentially filters out everything except for the really low frequencies, and it's this kind of frequency range that gives you that pumping kind of, that's what you feel in your chest if you're in a club. That's the kind of frequency that's going to be, and you can choose, you know, if you want the bass drum to be doing that or whether you want the bass to be doing that. In this case, with the bass container with that layer of sub, you should find that when I press play, so we've got a bit of drums there by the sound of things. So I can go back up here and maybe change the EQ a little bit more, turn the B down a bit, and then in the bass container, as I play it, you can see really down there, there's not much more than just that sub bass, and that's what that layer is doing essentially. I'll turn the filter off. Let's listen to it. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to record some bass. Now I'm going to do it off. I'm going to switch. I've shown you one way of doing some recording, you know, by recording in the range and taking pieces and building loops. What I'm going to do this time is show you how you may use the Panorama to do some recording. So I'm going to go to the clips view with my bass track selected rather than my master track, and you can just basically hit the clip and it will start recording straight away. When you're done, you hit it again to stop. Okay, so one of the disadvantages of working this way, the start and stop method, it's instantaneous, which is good, but of course what happened there is we ended up with an extra bar that we didn't want. So now I need to go in and edit that, which is slightly annoying. So I don't tend to work that way. What I tend to do is work like this: Shift and Enter, and that creates a new clip, and it gives me a clip of initially, I think it's 1 bar. So I can then overdub like so. So that's a much nicer way of working because I know it's 1 bar. If I wanted to do a 2 bar clip, you can set that up with the panorama. Again, in the clips view, you press new clip, you set the length that you want, and enter, and then you choose where you want the clip to be, like so. So now I've got a 2 bar clip going on here, and I can overdub straight away. Okay, staying on the panorama, I'm just going to take a little look at the. Well, I'm going to start by going back to the drums, and I'm going to press the instrument button because in instrument mode we got very special mapping, if you like, for Bitwig's drum machine and also for Bitwig's instrument layer. Now, the drum machine is obviously what we got on this track, and on this track here we've got the container, the instrument layer. So, in the cases of containers, you get your volumes over here for each layer. So here you can see I've got my kick, my snare, and my hat. So all of my drum levels can be controlled from here. The other thing that you'll notice is that the sample updates as I hit the pads, so I can very quickly start tuning the sample that I'm working on, and that's really useful for many ways. The other thing you can do is you can lock to whichever was the last pad you played, so you can start jamming, and you're only then affecting the pad that you've locked it to. So that's really great. All of this can be automated as well. All of this can be recorded as automation. The pads themselves, when you press the pads button, you can see I've got a way of getting up to another 4 samples if I've got a 16 sample kit. You can see that the sample names are in the display, which is really useful. I've got kick, snare, hi-hat there. I know exactly what's going to come when I play these. The feedback comes from Bitwig, so if I press play, this is what, Bitwig is giving me this information of what's playing. I can solo and mute as well, green being soloed, red being muted, and at any point I can clear all the mutes and solos that are there. So a lot of functionality for the drums. Where I've got a device on a pad with more parameters than 8. Because you can see I've been controlling all of the sound of the snare at the moment from here. It's actually the sampler. So if I press the pages button, I've got all of my available pages to then tweak as well. So it's a lot of functionality going on in the drum machine. If I switch to the instrument layer, it's a similar thing. Although to start off with, you can see we've got envelopes over here. This is the way that Panorama works. When you're in instrument mode, the entire control surface is dedicated to the instrument that's under control. In this case, the instrument layer. But what I can do is press the mix button, and then these become. If I press the view button, you can see I've got my layers here. So I've got my sub bass on there. Tells me the device that's actually playing. You can mute and solo. You can in the drum machine too. Now, but the possibilities of what you can do with this become really exciting when we consider the fact, if I go back to the home page, I can select. Let's add another layer, just to kind of get at what I'm getting at here. I'm going to add a kick to add an extra low end to the bass, if you like, and you can see now I can select the layer just like I did with the drum machine. I can select the individual instrument I want to edit within a layer. So now I can start editing the kick. I can start editing the kick, go to the polysynth and start changing the frequency resonance. So I'm diving into individual instruments within layered sound, if you like. Again, just like the drum machine, I press the menu button and up comes the available parameters for me in the useful, meaningful menus, not page 1, page 2, such and such. You never know what that means. What you want to see is proper modulated arrangement of the parameters. And we've even gone as far as, if you're used to the Panorama's level 1 integration, you know that the polysynth is already quite well mapped anyway, using Bitwig's internal mapping pages. But we've really gone to town on what you can do with our plugin mapping support. We've also mapped up the Bitwig instruments as well as third-party VSTs, and we'll look at some of that in a bit. But you can see here the LFOs, you can just switch between them very quickly. Now, and as I change the rate, you'll see that the beat updates as well, so that I always have control of the relevant parameter according to my rate mode, if you like. There's three different parameters based on what's selected down here on the rates. So then you know, we always update it. It's what we call value dependent mapping. We use it all the time. It's really, really important, and without being able to do it, it becomes quite a clunky experience where you have to have maybe two parameters for a delay parameter, if you like, when you synchronize it and when it's unsynchronized. So value dependent mapping is just one of the ways that Nektar really goes to town and helps you guys out by making a much more fluent experience, if you like, when you're controlling plugins. Okay, anyway, enough about that. What I'm going to do is get back to Bitwig, and I'm going to add another track. Now I've got some bass going on. Let's just go to the transport and start the scene one up. Okay, right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some strings, and I'm going to, so I can let's just look for some strings. Let's look at some presets here. Let's have a little play. So I can audition while I'm playing. So okay, so I'm going to just flick through a few others, I think. Let's go to string key. Now, strings always sound pretty uninteresting when you, by default. But I'm just going to record some now, and then what we're going to do is, well, you'll see. What we're going to do is make it more interesting by using a ducking effect, because I had this question a lot when I've been on tour. So I'll show you how all that works. Okay, that'll do. That'll do. There's my boring strings. So actually, while I'm on this, let me just go back a little bit and show you this little button here, which is micro pitching. Now, this has been there since Bitwig 1. It's a way of basically pitch bending, if you like, individual notes within a chord, because pitch bend is generally global, but in Bitwig you can, for the Bitwig devices at least, you can pitch bend individual notes. And where you've got things like the instrument, so a device which is capable of adding individual pitch bend information, polyphonic aftertouch, that kind of thing. Bitwig is supporting that by default, so you can record this pitch modulation from any device which has this 3D Midi support, if you like. I can't remember the exact term of the protocol, but anything that's sending polyphonic aftertouch or individual pitch bend for individual notes as you're playing, you can record that all live, which is quite an interesting. It's the only DAW I know of that's able to do that. I might be wrong. Someone, I'm sure, will correct me in the chat room if it is. But right now, you know, it's you know, they look into the future. It is a DAW for the future. It's 1 year old. It's incredible how far it's come in that year, I have to say. And this feature is now has been taken that much further by supporting the kind of some modern instruments with polyphonic aftertouch. One thing I have just noticed is this is a little bit long, so let's just deal with that and loop it round like so. Okay, now it's time to get rid of the boring strings and make them interesting. So because I had so many questions about how to do sidechain compression in Bitwig, I'll show you how to do that, but at the same time I'll explain a few a few other uses, a few other ways to achieve the effect of sidechain compression. Now, what people generally mean when they're looking for the sidechain compression effect is this kind of offbeat pumping that you get in a lot of dance tracks, where the bass drum the signal from the bass drum is cutting into an audio of another track by basically ducking the signal volume by affecting a compressor. And if you look at the dynamics device in Bitwig, so this thing, you'll see that it has a sidechain compression input right here. So that's one way of doing it. And just like we saw with the note mod, you just choose wherever you want it to come from, and that's going to be the signal for your it's going to be the gate, if you like, for your compressor. What I did, because I had what I realized is that so many people were looking for sidechain compression to get the kind of offbeat effect. I added a device to demonstrate this called a ducker, and the ducker is basically 4 different ways of achieving sidechain compression type effect for your strings. So you can see here, in this sense, I'm using an LFO mod. All of these are Bitwig mods. That's again routing signals to another device, and you can see straight away I've got this offbeat effect. And the beat, of course, the bass drum itself isn't doing the standard on beat 4/4, which would mean we'd then have to create another track and create like a dummy drum if we wanted to create that effect in the sidechain compression method. I guess what I'm saying is, don't just obviously there's ways of doing things, but in Bitwig there's often easier ways of creating that effect, and if you do that, you can sometimes create really interesting additions to the effect. So for example, here I have a bounce control. Because I'm using the LFO mod, let's just start that again, it's getting a bit... Let's just turn the master down a little bit, it's getting a little bit hot. So I've got a master control, and sorry, I've got an LFO control, and I've basically got 2 LFOs going on. So the bounce is just adding a second LFO. Let's just get this looped properly, because it's object tool, and then loop that. It's going out of time otherwise. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. The step mod way of doing it is a little bit more kind of on the beat. It's just a bit more. The LFO is a sine wave, so it'll be a slightly more gradual peak, if you like. Whereas a step mod is steps, so it's quite on the nose, if you like. A note mod is an interesting way of doing this. The note mod is it won't do anything to start with because there's no input. But what you can do with the note mod is you can select your well, let me explain how I've set this up. Basically, I've got a filter in the note effects, and it's filtering key 36, which is the bass drum of your drum machine, if you like. Everybody always wants to put the bass drum on pad 1, so pad 1 is basically triggering now this note source. And then I've got, in all of these, this is the case, by the way, I've got the dynamics thing, and I've got the modulation from, in this case, the envelope hitting the threshold there. So you can see when every time the bass drum goes, it hits the threshold. So that's essentially sidechain compression, but it's doing it with a MIDI note, rather than a specific MIDI note as well, rather than an audio source, which is a way of, really homing in on the bass drum, if you like, without any kind of noise and overspill. And then finally, I've got an audio mod way of doing it. And in a similar way to the note mod, you have to set that up yourself, with the device input. But in this case, rather than the note, it's going to be the audio signal that's going to trigger the gate to change the threshold and do the ducking. So, like I say, there's several ways of doing it. So it's just a way to encourage you to think out of the box, really, and obviously people will have been doing these tutorials about how to do sidechain compression and achieve this effect for a long time, but you know, when you think outside the box, you can be slightly more creative in the way that you do things, and also much quicker, which is always a good thing. Okay, so I've shown you quite a lot of production effects, and I'm aware of time, you know, slowly, well, quite quickly ticking away. So I guess, what do I want to show you now? I guess I'll probably leave it open for questions, and if anyone has any specific questions in the chat room potentially, then we can look at, you know, is there anything you want me to talk more about? If there's anything you're unsure about, then maybe we can look at that now.
Okay. Hi everyone, it's Tom here. We're having a look through the chat. Now we've got Volker in the chat, of course, from Bitwig, who's been actually doing a rather marvellous job. Thank you very much for coming into the chat. And in fact, I think he's handled most of the questions that people have actually had. Can
Great.
you spot any here, Steve, that haven't got...
No, he's batting them away. Which is great.
Yeah,
Good job.
He's doing a cracking job.
So maybe you'd like to just sort of sum up quickly what the new your opinion of the new revisions are, and what you like best and what you think is yet to come. There's a lot of people interested in what they think is going to come when 1.2 finally lands.
And of course, there isn't actually a definite date for that yet either, is there?
There's no definite date at the moment for the 1.2 release, for the 2 release, or for the Panorama 1.1. It's all work in progress, but you can see that it's really shaping up nicely. I guess what I will do is summarise what is new from what we've seen, because obviously I've gone kind of toing and froing between different things. So on Bitwig, what's new is the browser and the ability to browse by, well, basically just browse for everything, browse your presets. Everything is put together. VSTs, internal devices, all your presets are treated the same, and it's all based on metadata. I have to say, since this browser came out, when I go back to 1.1 to do testing with the Panorama, make sure it's all working nicely, I do miss it. It's incredible how much. It's like you don't realise how much you need it until it's there. The browser, it really does speed up workflow no end. It's incredibly fast.
The layout seems really intuitive.
Yeah, it's very well thought out, and I like the fact that it's intelligent enough to know that based on where you're selecting and clicking in the signal chain, it already does a lot of the filtering for you, and that's what makes it so quick. It's really, really good. The other feature was the Midi mapping. So the mappings are session based on this side. This little button down here will open up the browser. You can map Midi and QWERTY in the same page. There's no separate mappers for QWERTY and Midi, which is nice. You can map it to anything you want. You can map actual values to a. Let's just do that now. Let's press the E key, and you can set the value to wherever you want it to be. Which means that now when I press E, then you're going to get the value set wherever it happens to be. When I press E, it's going to shoot back to where I want it to be. And you can set that. You can set this the same parameter if you like, the same. In this case, the vocal level. I could put that across any keys if I wanted, or MIDI, so I can have a definite point of volume that I want to go to. Several different points if you like, and then. Going again, you've got the options preferences menu where you have the shortcuts for keyboards and for keyboard and controller mapping, so MIDI and keyboards. You can override what's already there, and these are global, so they will affect all your projects. You can map your MIDI controller if you like to actions within Bitwig, which is always really good. What we haven't looked at, I guess, is when you select a device. Over here in the device. In the inspector, you see all of the different modulation. It's a very clear and concise explanation of where your macro controls are going. In this case, you see I've got 8 macro controls, what they're controlling. There's a lot going on in this one because I've got 4 different mods, and then down the bottom here you've got the compressor controls, that affect. You can see like every single one of them has a it's affecting the attack of all 4 compressors within each mod. So there's one dial, if you like, for attack, regardless of which mod I select in order to do my ducking. You can see what else is there that's new. I think that's the main thing that's new. The Christian Vogel the Christian Vogel sample pack is that's really worth mentioning. And actually, what's interesting, what I found interesting about what Christian Vogel has done is he's used a lot of the kind of methods that I was, by using the modulate, the note mods, the effects chains, and creating big effects that way. Let me just show you, because I know that I am aware that sometimes the polysynth is a great, absolutely great device, and but this is what it sounds like by default. It's just a simple sawtooth with no effects. This is your default preset, and I really like that because it's the start of something to build on. But if you're potentially used to a VST instrument and you're looking for that big, exciting sound from preset 1, it could be slightly underwhelming. And one of the things I created in order to speed up my workflow with a lead synth, if you like, was all the common effects that tend to add warmth to the lead. So here we have even I haven't done anything to the polysynth, but you can see what a difference it makes. And then what I can do from there is I've got 8 macros in that control my effects chain. I can create virtually any lead sound that I'm looking for with these 8 controls. I can add a slightly more aggressive tone, if you like, with the screen control. I can add delay as well. I can just get this. It's really just a way of sketching out the sound I'm looking for rather than spending all this time browsing presets, because I don't have much time, in all honesty, with all the work I do with Bitwig, Nektar and other stuff. Basically, I don't want to spend time browsing loads and loads of presets. My goal is to sit down and use the tools that I have and learn them well, and that's really where you can become more creative, is by focusing on the kind of sound you're looking for. And you can always go back and fine tune it, but if you can get something just about right by using this kind of big lead warmth tool that I created, for example, then you can get something in the ballpark and go from there. Anything else I need to show you? Something else, I guess, for a nice way of using the new browser, going back to the browser. When I have a snare sample that's maybe a little flat. I mean, even with the big effects, it was still slightly flat. What you can do when you hit on the sampler, I can audition different samples. Let's go. Let's actually filter the snares. There we go. So I can try out different snares while it's still playing. And then, of course, with the panorama, you can also, well, it's still going, so I'm still auditioning, and I can fine tune with my panorama control. Fine tune the pitch, so I can audition the sample and fine tune it as well on the fly. So yeah, that's a very quick way of kind of improving your kit sounds as well. Okay, I guess if there's no more questions.
Yeah, I think Volker's got it pretty wrapped up in the chat. Thank you very much to him. Don't go away though. Steve's going to come back in, and then we're going to tell you something very special that will benefit you. So please, we're going to go to a bumper and then hold tight for the code word.
welcome back, and thanks once again to Tim for that very in-depth look into Bitwig, which does look incredibly intuitive, and there's a whole bunch of little things that I'm noticing on the browse, little tags that look exciting as well for the future. One thing I'd like to say about Nektar is here at Scan we tend to think of it as a DAW controller rather than just a MIDI controller. The level of integration that you can get with this is uncanny, and just towards the end there, I think Tim was showing you a little bit of that. But as Tom said, a little bit of good news for those of you who've watched. If you were to email us the word of the evening, which in this case is panorama. Can you say that, Tim?
Panorama.
Panorama.
I've said it a few times.
We might just be able to email you back with some preferential pricing. So, please make sure that you do that.
Yeah, one
Absolutely. And we're going to put an email address up for them, are we, Tom, at the end?
Yes, the email is on the screen. EU only, unfortunately.
I can't see it in my monitor, but there we go. So all that remains for me to say is to thank Tim once again. He's a stalwart. He's been here many times. He will be here many times in the future, but this is the last time that we're going to do a Scan webcast in this guise, as I've said before. The next time you see us, hopefully, will be the Scan Pro Audio show. All singing, all dancing, brand new set, brand new whole format and everything. We're really excited about it. We're looking forward to seeing you guys then. But once again, for tonight, thank you to Bitwig, thank you to Nektar, thanks to Tim.
Sure.
Good night.
One more thing.
Oh, one more thing.
Quick. Yes, if you're buying the Panorama, it's worth mentioning that Bitwig 8-track, an 8-track version of Bitwig, that means its limitation is obviously 8 tracks, and 2 third-party VST plugins. That's your limitation. You can still save. You can load. It's a great way of experiencing Bitwig. The 8-track version comes free for any new Panorama or Impact owner before the end of August. So if you are buying, keep that in mind and make sure you get your free copy of 8-track to really give it a good go.
Absolutely. Nothing left to say. Say good night, Tim.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.